Marina's life had taken an unexpected turn when she gave birth to her first child, Dennis, without the traditional trappings of marriage or a supportive partner. There was no grand romance, no wedding with a white dress and veil, just a baby and the reality of being a single mother. The father of her child disappeared as soon as Dennis was born, leaving Marina to navigate the challenges of motherhood alone. The early years were incredibly difficult. Marina moved from place to place, living in a dormitory, sharing cramped quarters in a communal apartment, and even staying with relatives in a tiny space partitioned off by a curtain. Money was scarce, and she took on any job she could find, counting every penny just to get by. But despite the hardships, Marina's love for her son kept her going. As Dennis grew older, things began to improve. She found a stable job, and life slowly became more manageable. When Dennis turned 3, Marina met Vincent, a man who seemed like the answer to her prayers. He showed interest in both her and her son, and when he suggested they get married, Marina agreed without hesitation. Vincent had inherited a large house in a village from his parents, where he lived alone. The house was spacious and seemed like the perfect place for them to start a new chapter in their lives. Marina believed she had found a secure and happy future for herself and her son. At first, everything seemed to be going well. Vincent treated Dennis kindly, and the boy adapted to his new life. But everything changed when Marina gave birth to another son, whom they named Tema. Vincent adored his biological son with an intensity that left Dennis on the outside looking in. The love and attention Vincent once showed Dennis quickly turned to coldness and disdain. Any small mistake Dennis made was met with harsh words and increasingly physical punishment. Marina was horrified by this change, but whenever she tried to intervene, Vincent would threaten her, making it clear that he was not above using violence to maintain control. The atmosphere in the house grew increasingly tense. Vincent's true nature was revealed as cruel and vindictive, and Marina felt trapped. She wanted to leave, to protect Dennis from the growing abuse, but Vincent's threats kept her paralyzed with fear. He warned her that if she ever tried to leave, he would take Tema away from her and she would never see him again. Faced with such a terrifying prospect, Marina felt she had no choice but to stay and endure the situation, all the while trying to find a way out. Vincent, meanwhile, saw Dennis as the main obstacle to his ideal family life. He believed that without the boy, he, Marina, and Tema could live happily together. His resentment toward Dennis grew until he decided to get rid of him entirely. Killing the boy outright was something even he couldn't stomach, so he devised a different plan, one that he was sure would rid him of Dennis forever. One day, when Marina had to take Tema to the doctor and would be gone for several hours, Vincent seized his opportunity. Knowing Dennis' love for nature, Vincent suggested they go for a walk in the forest to feed the squirrels. The idea delighted the boy, who had always loved spending time outdoors. They set off together, with Vincent leading Dennis deeper into the woods, far beyond the areas they usually visited. The path took them through a swampy region that was rarely traveled by the villagers. Vincent knew that once they crossed the swamp, the dense forest on the other side would be a perfect place to leave Dennis. He intended to abandon the boy there, confident that Dennis would be unable to find his way back and would eventually succumb to the elements or be taken by wild animals. After walking for a long time, they reached a thickly forested area. "Let's rest here," Vincent said, watching as Dennis, tired from the long walk, sank to the ground. The boy was puzzled by the lack of squirrels and the unfamiliarity of the surroundings, but he trusted his stepfather. After eating a small snack and drinking some tea from a thermos, Dennis drifted off to sleep, his head resting on the soft moss. Vincent watched the boy sleep for a moment, then turned and began the journey back home alone. When Marina returned later that day, he met her with a fabricated story of how Dennis had wandered off while he was busy with other tasks and couldn't be found. He pretended to be distressed, even joining the search efforts that quickly mobilized in the village. In the meantime, Dennis awoke to find himself alone in the forest. The realization that his stepfather was nowhere to be seen filled him with fear. He called out for Vincent, his voice trembling, but there was no response. As the hours passed, he cried out louder and louder, but the only answer was the eerie silence of the forest. As night began to fall, Dennis huddled under the same tree where he had fallen asleep, his small body shaking with fear and cold. The night brought with it a deep sense of loneliness, but it also brought an unexpected companion. As Dennis curled up on the forest floor, too scared to sleep, he felt something warm and soft against him. Opening his eyes, he saw a large gray dog lying next to him, its body curled protectively around his. Dennis, only 5 years old and not fully understanding the danger he was in, assumed it was a dog and gratefully snuggled into its warmth, whispering, "Take me home, doggy. You know the way to my mom." The creature was not a dog, but an old she-wolf. She had lived alone in the forest for years, separated from her pack, and had never borne pups of her own. Something in Dennis's scent, innocent and helpless, like a young cub, had triggered a protective instinct in the she-wolf. She stayed with him throughout the night, keeping him warm as he slept. At dawn, Dennis awoke to find the she-wolf still by his side. He hugged her neck and repeated his plea for her to take him home. Understanding his need, the she-wolf stood and began to walk, slowly leading Dennis through the forest. The boy followed her trustingly, holding onto her fur as they moved through the trees. Back at home, Marina was beside herself with grief. It had been 2 days since Dennis disappeared, and there was still no sign of him. She sat by the window, unable to eat or sleep, her eyes fixed on the path leading to the forest. Then, as if in a dream, she saw a large gray dog emerge from the trees, and beside it, a small figure she recognized immediately. Dennis. Marina screamed, rushing out of the house. Vincent, realizing what was happening, ran after her, but his mind was spinning. How had the boy survived? Marina reached Dennis and scooped him up in her arms, tears streaming down her face. The she-wolf stood a few feet away, watching them with calm eyes. Dennis babbled excitedly about how the doggy had taken care of him, oblivious to the tension between the adults. As Vincent approached, the she-wolf fixed her gaze on him. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding of what he had tried to do. Without warning, the she-wolf lunged and clamped her jaws around Vincent's arm. He howled in pain, but the she-wolf didn't intend to kill him. She released him quickly, leaving a deep bite mark as a warning. The commotion drew the attention of the neighbors, who rushed over to see what was happening. In the presence of witnesses, Vincent's facade crumbled. Desperate to stop the pain and avoid the wrath of the growing crowd, he confessed to everything. His plan to abandon Dennis, his lies to Marina, and the twisted reasoning behind it all. Vincent was arrested, and his subsequent trial resulted in a lengthy prison sentence. As for the she-wolf, she continued to visit the village from time to time. Marina and Dennis, grateful beyond words, always made sure she had food to eat whenever she came around. In the end, Marina knew she had been saved by something much greater than luck. She had been saved by the fierce, protective love of an animal that understood the purity of a child's heart. Dennis, unaware of the danger he had been in, would remember the she-wolf as his hero, the one who had guided him safely home to his mother. And Marina would forever be grateful to the gray guardian of the forest who had restored her son to her arms.